Long before the pack ever noticed her, Lena had already learned the most important rule of survival. Never cry where they can see you. The Moonridge pack house stood on a hill surrounded by tall pine trees. At night, lanterns glowed warmly through its large windows while wolves inside laughed, drank, and celebrated their victories. But not everyone inside belonged to that joy. In the back of the kitchen, near a small window overlooking the dark forest, Lena quietly scrubbed a stack of dishes. Her hands moved automatically through the warm water. Soap. Rinse. Dry. Repeat. The sleeves of her faded grey shirt were rolled slightly above her wrists, revealing faint purple marks along her skin. Old bruises. Some healing. Some new. She ignored the sting every time the hot water touched them. Pain was familiar. Pain was normal. And most importantly, pain was something she had learned to hide. From the dining hall came loud laughter. Someone slammed a mug onto the wooden table. "Lena," a voice shouted. "Where's the wine? Did the useless Omega forget again?" More laughter followed. Lena dried her hands and grabbed the bottle from the shelf. She walked into the large dining room quietly, keeping her eyes lowered as always. The long wooden table was filled with pack warriors. Strong wolves who returned from patrol and hunting with pride in their voices and blood on their boots. None of them looked at Lena like she mattered. One of the warriors snatched the wine bottle from her hand. "Finally," he scoffed. Another wolf leaned slightly closer to her neck and sniffed the air. "Still no scent," he muttered with disappointment. "Barely smells like a wolf at all." Laughter rippled across the table again. Lena didn't react. She simply turned and walked back toward the kitchen. Invisible. That was safer. Because if anyone ever looked too closely, if they ever noticed what she was hiding, the fragile piece she had built would shatter. Outside the window, the moon rose higher above the forest. Silver light spilled across the trees. And fate, quiet and patient, was already waiting. Soon, the pack would finally notice the quiet Omega girl. And when they did, everything would change. The night of the moon ceremony arrived wrapped in silver light and quiet anticipation. Deep within the forest, the Moonridge pack gathered in their sacred clearing. Tall pine trees circled the open space like silent guardians, their branches swaying gently in the cool night wind. Lanterns hung from the branches, casting warm golden light over the gathered wolves. At the center of the clearing burned a large bonfire. Its flames danced toward the sky, crackling loudly as sparks floated into the darkness. Tonight was special. Under the full moon, the bond of fate sometimes revealed itself. Mates. The most sacred connection blessed by the moon goddess. Lena stood near the far edge of the clearing, keeping herself half hidden behind a large tree. She wore a simple pale dress, nothing like the elegant outfits worn by the higher-ranking she-wolves in the pack. She had never expected tonight to mean anything for her. Omegas were rarely chosen by fate. Still, something strange stirred inside her chest. A faint warmth. A pull. At first she thought it was anxiety, but the feeling grew stronger. Her heart began to race. Her breath caught in her throat. Confused, Lena slowly lifted her head. And then she saw him. Marcus. He stood near the bonfire with several other warriors, laughing loudly as he spoke. Tall, confident, admired by many in the pack. His dark hair reflected the firelight as he tilted his head back in amusement. The moment his eyes met Lena's, everything changed. The invisible thread between them snapped tight. A powerful sensation exploded through her chest. Mate. The word echoed through her mind like thunder. Her wolf stirred weakly inside her, responding to the bond. Hope bloomed in her heart so suddenly it hurt. For the first time in years, Lena felt something close to happiness. But Marcus's expression didn't change with joy. Instead, his face twisted with confusion, then disgust. "No," he said sharply. The word cut through the clearing. Nearby conversations died instantly. Marcus stared at her like she was something foul. "The moon goddess must be joking," he scoffed loudly. Murmurs rippled through the gathered wolves. Lena felt the hopeful warmth inside her chest begin to crack. "Marcus," she whispered softly, taking a hesitant step forward. But he immediately stepped back. As if she were poison. "You." he said with disbelief. An omega. Several wolves began whispering. Others laughed openly. Marcus's voice rose so everyone could hear. I, Marcus of the Moonridge Pack, he declared coldly, reject Lena as my mate. The words struck like lightning. Agonizing pain tore through Lena's chest as the bond shattered. Her knees nearly buckled. Gasps echoed through the clearing. Then came the laughter. Cruel. Mocking. Marcus looked down at her one last time, his expression full of contempt. Know your place. Lena's vision blurred, but she forced herself to stand tall. She would not cry. Not here. Not in front of them. So without another word, she turned away from the bonfire and walked slowly into the shadows of the forest. Behind her, the pack continued whispering and laughing. But from the far side of the clearing, another pair of eyes had watched everything. Cold. Sharp. Observant. Alpha Rowan stood silently beside the ancient oak tree, his golden gaze fixed on the quiet omega disappearing into the darkness. And for reasons he couldn't explain, the rejection didn't feel right to him at all. Morning crept slowly over the Moonridge pack house, pale sunlight spilling across the stone courtyard and the tall pine trees surrounding the territory. But inside the pack house, the atmosphere was already buzzing. Whispers had traveled faster than the sunrise. By the time Lena entered the kitchen, everyone already knew. The rejected omega. She stepped quietly through the doorway, tying the apron around her waist as she moved toward the counter. The familiar smell of bread and coffee filled the room, and the cooks were already busy preparing breakfast for the warriors. But conversations suddenly lowered as she walked past. Not silent. Just quieter. Like wolves watching prey. Lena kept her eyes down and began slicing bread. The knife moved steadily beneath her fingers. Slice. 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 A group of she-wolves stood near the doorway, pretending to talk while their eyes remained fixed on her. One of them finally snorted. I heard Marcus almost choked when he realized she was his mate. Another laughed. Can you blame him? An omega with barely any scent. More laughter followed. Lena's grip tightened slightly on the knife. But her face remained calm. Invisible. Always invisible. Heavy footsteps echoed into the kitchen. The room fell silent instantly. Marcus. Lena felt his presence before she saw him. He leaned casually against the counter beside her, crossing his arms as if the entire room belonged to him. Well, he said loudly, look who's still here. No one spoke. Everyone was watching. Lena continued slicing the bread. Marcus tilted his head slightly, studying her expression. You should be thanking me, he said. The knife paused. Slowly, Lena lifted her eyes to meet his. Thanking you? She asked softly. Marcus shrugged. For rejecting you. A few wolves snickered from the doorway. You would have embarrassed me, he continued. Imagine telling other packs my mate was the weakest omega here. His words hung in the air like poison. For a moment, the kitchen waited for Lena to react. To cry. To beg. To scream. Instead, she simply nodded once. You're right, she said quietly. The response caught Marcus off guard. What? She lowered her gaze again and resumed cutting the bread. You did the right thing. Her calm voice made the room strangely uncomfortable. Marcus frowned. He had expected a reaction. Pain. Desperation. But she sounded, almost relieved. Across the dining hall, seated at the long wooden table, someone had been silently watching the entire exchange. Alpha Rowan. His golden eyes narrowed slightly. Most wolves in the room avoided his gaze. But Lena hadn't even noticed him. She was focused only on her work. Yet Rowan noticed something no one else seemed to see. Her hands. They trembled faintly. Not from heartbreak. From pain. The sleeve of her shirt shifted slightly as she reached for another loaf of bread, revealing dark bruises circling her wrist. Rowan's expression hardened. That wasn't the mark of rejection. That was something else entirely. And suddenly, the rejected omega girl became far more interesting than he had ever expected. Because someone in his pack was hurting her. And Lena was trying very hard to hide it. The bruise on Lena's wrist lingered in Rowan's mind long after breakfast ended. It shouldn't have mattered. Pack disputes, personal conflicts, even broken mate bonds, those were ordinary parts of wolf life. An alpha's duty was to maintain order, not involve himself in every small problem. And yet, as Rowan stood at the edge of the training field that afternoon, watching warriors spar beneath the pale winter sun, his attention kept drifting. Not toward the fighters. Toward the far side of the courtyard. Lena moved quietly across the stone path carrying a basket filled with folded laundry. Her head was lowered like always, her pace careful and unhurried. Invisible. That was the word Daniel, his beater, had used earlier. Rowan folded his arms across his chest. Invisible wolves didn't survive long in a pack hierarchy. Someone always noticed weakness. Yet Lena had lived here for years. Without allies. Without protection. Without complaining. That wasn't weakness. That was endurance. Two young warriors crossed the courtyard in front of her. Rowan recognized them immediately. Brent and Cade. Loud, arrogant, barely out of adolescence. They saw Lena at the same moment. Brent grinned. Watch this. Before Rowan could react, Brent deliberately stepped sideways, slamming his shoulder into Lena as he passed. The basket slipped from her arms. Clothes spilled across the dusty ground. A few warriors nearby chuckled. Lena froze for half a second. Then, quietly, she knelt. One by one, she began picking the clothes up from the dirt. No protest. No anger. Just silent acceptance. Cade laughed. Careful, Omega. Wouldn't want you tripping over your own useless feet. Brent smirked and walked away. Rowan's jaw tightened. That was unnecessary. Daniel glanced at him from beside the training ring. They're idiots, Daniel said with a shrug. But she's used to it. Rowan didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on Lena. As she reached for the last shirt lying on the ground, her sleeve slid up slightly. The same bruise. Still dark against her pale skin. But this time Rowan noticed something else. Her hand trembled. Not with humiliation. With pain. Slowly, Lena stood again and placed the clothes back into the basket. For a brief moment, her gaze lifted toward the training field. Toward Rowan. Their eyes met. It lasted only a second. But something flickered in her expression. Fear. Then she quickly looked away and continued walking toward the servants' entrance. Rowan exhaled slowly. That girl, he muttered. Daniel raised an eyebrow. What about her? Rowan watched the door close behind Lena. His wolf stirred uneasily beneath his skin. I don't think she's just a weak Omega. Daniel chuckled. Trust me, Alpha. Lena is exactly what she looks like. But Rowan wasn't convinced. Because weak wolves didn't survive like that. They broke. They begged. They fought. Lena did none of those things. She endured. And something about that quiet endurance bothered him more than any open rebellion ever could. Rowan turned away from the training field. His instincts were already pulling him toward the back of the pack house. Toward the kitchen. Toward the girl who never fought back. And for the first time in years, the Alpha of Moonridge Pack found himself curious about an Omega. Very curious. Even as winter began to fade into the first hints of spring, the cold inside the pack house never seemed to leave Lena. She moved through the halls quietly, carrying trays of food, stacking dishes, and attending to chores without a single complaint. The whispers never stopped. She's pathetic. Still hiding in the shadows, like always. Does she even have a spine? And yet, she never raised her voice. She never snapped back. She never cried. It was as if she had learned that fighting drew attention, and attention brought danger. Rowan noticed. From across the courtyard, he watched her navigate the pack halls, weaving through the chaos like a ghost. Today, she was confronted by Marcus again. He had lingered near the stairwell, smirking as she approached with a tray of freshly baked bread. Careful, Omega, he said, his voice loud enough for the servants nearby to hear. Wouldn't want to break anything while carrying it. Lena's hands tightened around the tray. She could feel the heat of frustration building in her chest, a wildfire begging to be unleashed. And yet, she didn't lash out. Instead, She spoke softly. "Thank you for your concern," she murmured, her gaze fixed on the bread. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "You're smiling." A few wolves snickered from the nearby staircase. "Yes," she said simply. "I always smile when I work." Something about her calmness, her refusal to give him satisfaction, unsettled Marcus. He had expected tears, rage, something to humiliate. Nothing came. Rowan's eyes narrowed. He had been watching quietly from the doorway, leaning against the wooden frame. His golden gaze followed every movement, every controlled gesture, every quiet step. Why didn't she fight back? It didn't look like weakness. It looked deliberate. A deliberate hiding of pain. Rowan's wolf stirred. Protective. Angry. Curious. He knew the pack, knew their games, their cruelty, their hierarchy. No one endured like Lena without reason. She had learned something. Something he hadn't yet discovered. As she turned to leave, carrying the tray toward the dining hall, her wrist brushed against the edge of the counter. The faint bruise peeked through the sleeve of her blouse. It wasn't fresh. It wasn't old. It was recent enough to make Rowan's pulse tighten. No one else had noticed. But he did. The Omega who never fought back. The Omega who bore pain silently. The Omega the pack dismissed as fragile. Rowan felt an unexplainable pull toward her. Curiosity. Concern. Something deeper that he refused to name. She disappeared into the dining hall, head bowed, shoulders squared. And Rowan realized, with an unfamiliar and unsettling certainty, he needed to know why. Why she endured. Why she hid the storm beneath her quiet exterior. Because something in the quiet Omega's soul demanded to be seen. The kitchen was quiet now, the midday sun spilling through the tall windows and casting a warm glow across the wooden counters. Lena worked silently, folding sheets and washing the last of the morning dishes. Each movement was precise, practiced, almost automatic. Yet behind the calm surface, her body ached. Her wrists throbbed where Marcus's cruelty and others' careless hands had left marks. Bruises hidden beneath long sleeves, scars etched beneath the skin that no one else noticed. She had spent years learning to hide the pain, to pretend it didn't exist. But today, it would no longer stay hidden. The door creaked behind her. She froze. "Lena," a low voice said. Rowan stepped into the kitchen, silent as a shadow. His golden eyes didn't sweep over the dishes, the counters, or the empty floor. They went straight to her wrists. And for the first time, Lena felt her carefully constructed walls tremble. You've been hurt," he said softly, almost to himself. Her fingers tightened around the dish towel, blanching white. It's nothing," she whispered. "It's not nothing." His voice was firm, unwavering, protective. It carried the weight of an alpha who had seen far too much to be fooled by silence. Lena's throat tightened. She had trained herself to answer no questions, to explain nothing, to survive quietly. Yet Rowan took a step closer. His shadow stretched across the counter, dark and powerful. "Who did this to you?" he demanded. Her heart thumped. She couldn't tell him, not yet. The truth was messy, dangerous, tied to pack politics and secrets that could destroy more than just her. She shook her head, swallowing hard. "No one, it's nothing important." Rowan's jaw clenched. His wolf stirred beneath his skin, growling softly. "Lena," he said slowly, each word deliberate, "I don't care what you think you're hiding. No one in my pack lays a hand on you without me knowing." The fire in his gaze was unlike anything she'd ever seen. She wanted to recoil, but instead she found herself rooted in place. A flash of anger crossed his face. Rage at the injustice she had endured. At the silent suffering she carried. And beneath it, something else. Concern. Curiosity. A need to protect. For a brief moment, Lena's resolve faltered. The walls she had built over years of pain shook. She began, but words failed her. Rowan's hand hovered near her wrist, not touching, but his presence demanded honesty. "Lena," he said again, softer now, "I will find out who did this. And when I do, they'll regret it." Her chest tightened, a mixture of fear and something unspoken stirring deep within her. For the first time in years, someone saw not just the quiet Omega, the one everyone ignored, but the pain she had buried beneath bruises. And Rowan knew, this was only the beginning. Because the secret she had worked so hard to hide was far darker than either of them could imagine. Ever since that afternoon in the kitchen, Lena felt his eyes on her. At first, it was subtle, just a glance as she moved through the hallways, his presence lingering at the edge of her awareness. But soon, it became impossible to ignore. Rowan watched everything. Every movement, every careful step, every quiet word she spoke. She hated it. And yet, she couldn't stop noticing it. It made her heart race in ways she didn't understand. During the next meal, she carried the trays with her usual quiet precision. Conversation buzzed around her. Wolves laughed, teased, whispered. Marcus sneered at a joke across the table, but it barely registered. Then she felt it again. A pair of golden eyes tracking her movements. She froze for a fraction of a second, glancing toward the doorway. Rowan leaned against the frame, arms crossed, expression unreadable. Her pulse spiked. Why was he watching her? She couldn't bring herself to look away. She wanted to, but curiosity pricked at her chest like a thorn. He didn't speak. He didn't approach. Yet his presence was heavier than anyone else in the room. Later, in the courtyard, Lena carried buckets of water to the stables. Her muscles ached from chores, but her steps remained steady. She sensed him again. Rowan, standing atop the low stone wall, watching her silently. His wolf prowled in the distance of his mind, alert and restless. Lena stopped. "Why?" she whispered under her breath. The wind carried her words to no one but the trees. Was it suspicion? Concern? Curiosity? Something else she dared not name? Her ears flicked nervously. Her heart raced. That night, when she lay on the narrow bed in her small room, the events replayed endlessly in her mind. The glance in the kitchen. The way he had stood there without speaking. The way his golden eyes had seemed to pierce through her carefully constructed walls. Her wolf stirred uneasily. She had spent her life hiding, pretending, enduring. And now, someone was watching. Truly watching. It was terrifying. And strangely exhilarating. The next day, as Lena swept the courtyard, she noticed movement in the shadows. Rowan approached quietly, steps measured, careful. "Why do you follow me?" she asked, not hiding the sharp edge in her voice. Rowan stopped a few feet away, his gaze steady and unwavering. "I'm not following," he said simply. "I'm observing." She bit back a retort. Observation felt different from curiosity, different from something deeper, something she wasn't ready to confront. You shouldn't waste your time," she said finally, turning back to the broom. But Rowan didn't leave. And for the first time in years, Lena felt the fragile stirrings of something she had buried long ago, hope. Because maybe, someone was finally noticing the Omega who never fought back. The forest was alive with shadows that night, the wind whispering through the pines as if warning of what was coming. Lena's chest still ached from the constant strain of hiding, but she had learned to endure. Every day was a battle she fought silently, every word carefully measured, every movement precise. Yet tonight, she could feel it, the weight of danger pressing closer. A group of young warriors had been following her from the outskirts of the pack house, eyes sharp, teeth bared in cruel amusement. They had been testing her patience for days. Tonight, they intended to break her. "You're so pathetic, Omega," one hissed, shoving her into the narrow path between two towering pines. Lena stumbled, dropping the basket of herbs she had been carrying. The contents spilled across the mossy ground. "Pick it up," another sneered. "Or do we have to teach you a lesson?" Her hands trembled, not with fear, but with a controlled fury she had never allowed herself to feel before. "Please," she whispered, voice steady despite the storm rising in her chest. "I just want to pass. I'm not bothering anyone." The laughter came again, sharp and biting. One of the warriors lunged forward, knocking her to the ground. Lena's breath left her in a sharp gasp as dirt pressed against her face. Her wrist scraped against a root, pain flaring in the old bruise Rowan had noticed. Before she could rise, a shadow fell across the clearing. "Enough." The voice was low, deep, impossible to ignore. Rowan stepped between her and the attackers, his presence radiating authority and danger. His wolf surged inside him, furious, protective. "You'll regret this," he growled, eyes blazing golden in the firelight filtering through the trees. The warriors froze, taken aback by the intensity of his gaze. "Back off," Rowan repeated, more controlled but deadly. "Now." The moment stretched. Then, reluctantly, they backed away, muttering insults that sounded weak even to themselves. Rowan turned to Lena. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, refusing to meet his eyes. "You didn't have to endure that alone," he said softly, his voice carrying concern she had never heard directed at her before. Her throat tightened. She wanted to explain, to tell him everything, the bruises, the rejection, the endless hiding, but the words caught. Instead, she whispered, I'm fine." He knelt slightly, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Fine," he repeated, his tone skeptical. "You've been pretending fine for far too long." Her chest ached, not just from the attacks, but from the sudden, overwhelming realization. Someone finally saw her. Truly saw her. And Rowan didn't look away. For the first time, Lena felt the stirrings of trust and fear. Because letting him see her completely could change everything. And she wasn't sure she was ready. But she couldn't deny it. Her wolf whispered the truth. She wanted him to stay. Even if the entire pack had turned against her. The fire crackled softly in the small cabin behind the packhouse, throwing flickering shadows across the walls. Lena sat curled in the corner, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the flames. Her hands trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from the memory she had buried for years. Rowan sat across from her, silent, watching. He hadn't forced her to speak. He hadn't rushed her. But his presence carried the weight of inevitability, and Lena knew the walls she had built were fragile tonight. "It wasn't just Marcus," she whispered finally, her voice barely audible over the fire. Rowan's golden eyes didn't shift. "Then who?" She swallowed, hesitating. Each word felt like pulling a knife from her own chest. "My pack, my family," she began. They weren't always kind. When I was younger, I made mistakes, small ones, but they punished me." Her wolf stirred nervously beneath her skin, recoiling at the memory. "They tied me to the cellar for days once. No food, no water, just shadows and cold stone. And if anyone had found out, if the Alpha had known," her voice cracked, "I would have been exiled, or worse." Rowan's expression darkened. Anger flared in his chest, but he held it in check. "You survived that?" he asked softly. She nodded. "I had to. I couldn't let anyone see weakness. Not my family. Not the pack. Not anyone." A shiver ran through her. She had spent years perfecting invisibility. Smiles when she wanted to scream. Quiet steps when she wanted to run. Bruises hidden beneath long sleeves. Secrets buried deep. Rowan leaned forward, the firelight catching the sharp lines of his face. "And Marcus, he knows nothing." Her eyes flicked downward. "He only sees what everyone else sees, a weak, invisible Omega. He doesn't know, he doesn't care." The room was silent for a long moment, except for the crackle of the fire. Then Rowan reached a hand toward her, not touching, just hovering near her arm. "I see you," he said, voice low, almost a growl. "All of you. Every scar, every bruise, every fear you've tried to hide. And if anyone tries to hurt you again, I will stop them. I promise you that." Lena's chest tightened. She wanted to recoil. She wanted to pull away from the intensity of his gaze. But something in her told her she didn't have to. Because Rowan wasn't just observing. He wasn't judging. He was recognizing the truth she had buried, the darkness she had endured alone. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel it, the tiniest flicker of trust. And yet, the secret she carried was still dangerous. The pack wouldn't remain idle forever. The betrayal, the abuse, the lies, they had roots deeper than she had ever admitted. And Rowan would soon discover just how far the danger reached. But for tonight, Lena allowed herself a single, small relief. Someone knew. Someone saw her. And Rowan's presence promised that she might not have to face the darkness alone. The pack grounds were quiet that evening, shadows stretching long under the silver light of the rising moon. Lena moved through the stables, sweeping the straw from the floor, her movements steady but careful. Every so often, she glanced toward the forest's edge, half expecting one of the pack's cruel warriors to appear. But it wasn't them who appeared. Rowan stepped out from the tree line, his presence commanding even in the dim light. Golden eyes fixed on her, unwavering. She froze. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said softly, but there was an edge to his voice, a warning she couldn't ignore. "I'm fine," Lena murmured, refusing to meet his gaze. Rowan took a step closer. His wolf stirred restlessly beneath his skin, sensing the tension, the danger, and the hidden fire within her. "Fine," he repeated, voice low and measured. "You carry more pain than anyone here realizes. And it's not just Marcus. I've seen it, the bruises, the way the pack treats you, the weight you hide in your chest." Lena's breath caught. She looked up briefly, finally meeting his gaze. His eyes were full of something she had never seen before: understanding, recognition, a quiet fury at anyone who dared hurt her. "You see me?" she whispered, barely audible. "I see you," he said, stepping closer still. "All of you. Every scar, every fear, every secret you've buried. And I won't let anyone touch you again without consequence." Her chest tightened. The words struck something deep within her, a mix of relief and fear. She had spent years hiding, enduring, surviving alone. And now, someone, not just anyone, but the Alpha, finally saw her. Truly saw her. Rowan's hand hovered near hers, hesitant but purposeful. "You've endured more than anyone should ever have to. And yet, you survive. That strength, hidden beneath all the pain, is remarkable." Her lips parted, but no words came. She had no explanation for him, no way to condense years of silent suffering into a few sentences. Instead, she simply let him see her. And Rowan took it in, carefully, like a predator respecting the prey he had no intention of harming. His wolf growled softly beneath the surface, not in threat, but in possession. "You're not invisible," he said finally. "Not to me. Not anymore." Lena's heart thudded painfully in her chest. She wanted to pull away, to deny the stirrings of something she barely understood. Yet the truth was undeniable. For the first time in her life, someone powerful, someone feared by the pack, wasn't judging her weakness. He was acknowledging her endurance, her worth. And in that moment, as the moonlight kissed the tops of the pine trees and a gentle wind stirred through the clearing, Lena felt the fragile, dangerous flicker of hope. Hope that maybe, she didn't have to hide anymore. Rowan's golden gaze softened, but the protective edge remained. Because he had finally seen her. And he wouldn't let her go. The Moonridge pack had never been completely stable. Power shifted like the wind, alliances forged and broken, rivalries simmering just below the surface. But tonight, the tension reached a breaking point. Rowan paced the edge of the pack house, golden eyes blazing beneath the silver moonlight. His jaw was tight, his wolf restless beneath his skin. "They think they can push her," he muttered, voice low, dangerous. "They don't realize who she is, or who I am." Daniel, his beater, stood beside him, arms crossed. "It's Marcus. And the others. They'll regret this, Alpha. But the pack, they might resist your interference." Rowan's gaze flicked to the shadows of the courtyard. Lena had been warned to stay inside. She hadn't. She never did. She carried herself quietly but with an unwavering determination that both infuriated and intrigued him. "They'll try to make her bow," Rowan said, teeth clenched. "They'll try to humiliate her. Again." A sudden roar split the night. From the far side of the clearing, Marcus and his group of young warriors appeared, circling like wolves smelling blood. Their sneers were cruel, their laughter hollow. "Look who thinks she belongs here," Marcus shouted. "The rejected Omega. Still alive somehow." Lena stepped forward from the shadow of the pack house, chest lifted slightly, gaze steady. Rowan's wolf surged at the sight. Protective. Possessive. Unyielding. "Stay behind me," he growled, moving swiftly toward her. But Lena didn't flinch. She didn't step back. She had endured years of abuse. Years of hiding. Years of silent suffering. Now, standing beside her alpha, she felt something she had never allowed herself before: strength. The first warrior lunged. Rowan intercepted him effortlessly, his movements precise, controlled, deadly. The others hesitated, realizing too late that they had underestimated both the alpha and the omega he had chosen to protect. Lena's wolf stirred, responding to Rowan's, a faint resonance of power and trust. She could feel it beneath her skin, a bond awakening. "You will leave her alone," Rowan said, voice calm but carrying the weight of absolute authority. The warriors faltered. Even Marcus looked uncertain, caught between fear and stubborn pride. Rowan stepped closer to Lena, shoulder brushing hers. "No one hurts what belongs to me," he said quietly. The words reverberated through the clearing. Not just to the pack, but to Lena herself. For the first time, the pack realized she was no longer invisible. And Rowan was no longer the distant alpha who tolerated petty cruelty. Together, they were a force. And the war within the pack had only just begun. Because anyone daring to challenge the omega they underestimated, or the alpha who protected her, would soon learn exactly what happens when power and loyalty collide. The night was still, the moon casting silver light across the clearing as the last whispers of tension faded from the Moonridge pack grounds. Lena stood beside Rowan, her chest still racing from the confrontation earlier. The pack had scattered, intimidated by the alpha's wrath and the quiet power emanating from her. For the first time, she felt truly safe. Rowan's golden eyes never left her as he stepped closer, closing the small space between them. His wolf, once restless and protective, now pulsed in perfect rhythm with hers, a bond recognized, acknowledged, and claimed. "You endured so much," he said softly, voice low, almost tender. "And yet, you stood here. You never gave up." Lena's throat tightened. Words failed her. She had spent years hiding, enduring, surviving. And now, she didn't have to. Not anymore. Rowan reached out, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. "You don't have to hide from me," he whispered. "I see you. Every part of you. And I'll never let anyone hurt you again." Her breath caught, and for the first time in years, she allowed herself to relax into his presence. The fear, the pain, the years of rejection, they all seemed to fade, replaced by something steady, undeniable, and powerful. Rowan lowered his forehead to hers, their eyes locking. The energy between them crackled like fire in the cold night. "You're mine," he said, not as a threat, but as a promise. Lena's wolf stirred, and a warmth spread through her chest. "And you're mine," she murmured back, her voice stronger than she expected. The pack watched in silence from the shadows, understanding without question that the bond had been sealed, not by ceremony or tradition, but by endurance, trust, and unspoken recognition. For the first time, Lena felt whole, seen, powerful, loved. Rowan's hands held her gently, yet with the strength of an alpha who would defend her until his last breath. And in that moment, under the silver light of the full moon, all the pain, the rejection, and the hidden scars of the past faded into insignificance. Because she had survived. And she had finally been claimed by the one who had always seen her. The omega who had hidden her tears for years finally smiled, not for the pack, not for the world, but for herself. And the alpha who had watched, protected, and waited, finally held what had always been his. Together, they stepped forward into a future where no secret, no betrayal, and no cruelty could touch them again. The night was theirs. And so was each other.